We begin with unequal domestic labor under COVID-19. The second shift is an important term when discussing the unequal division of labor within the household. The term was used by sociologists Arlie Hochschild and Anne Machung in order to refer to the unpaid responsibilities, such as housework and child-rearing, that unequally falls onto women to carry out, at least in heterosexual contexts. According to a 2010 Statistics Canada survey, in straight couples who were both full-time employees and had children, women spent 49.8 hours a week on childcare, compared to the 27.2 hours a week men spent on childcare. Why does the domestic labor fall onto women to carry out disproportionately? And why are the hours spent on domestic duties divided so unevenly? One sociological explanation is that this stems from society's gendered expectations of women and men. As more parents continue to work from home as a result of the pandemic, how do you think that the statistics on the division of labor have changed under COVID? Do you think that the division of labor would be more equal along gender lines or less equal under COVID? Well, a recent BBC article cited the findings done by researchers from Boston Consulting Group. Their survey, which had more than 3,000 participants within the US and Europe, found that women still do 15 hours a week of unpaid domestic labor more than their male partners, with mothers taking on even more responsibilities now, such as homeschooling. Likewise, researchers from the universities of Oxford, Cambridge, and Zurich saw this same pattern with households of varying incomes. A recent study by Schaefer, Schiebling, and Milkey of 1,234 Canadian mothers and fathers explored how the unequal division of labor has been impacted by COVID. While the study found that mothers take on a majority of the domestic responsibilities, the study found that there was a small shift as more fathers are participating in domestic labor as well. Something interesting emerging from this study is that household tasks are still heavily gendered. For instance, the data collected revealed that household tasks like laundry were still predominantly done by women, thus suggesting, quote, "this task remains in the maternal domain," unquote. Additionally, mothers also took on the responsibility of helping children with schoolwork since schools closed. Meanwhile, there was an increase of fathers doing more of the grocery and necessity shopping. Prior to COVID, 30% of fathers took on most or all of this task, and since the pandemic, this has risen to 37.4%. As noted in the study, going to the grocery store requires an individual to enter a public space where there is a possibility of being exposed to the virus. And some fathers may be participating more in this task as they are perceived to be their family's protectors. There was some concerns that the unequal division of labor would lead to a regression within the family and household, with women taking on all of the domestic responsibilities. However, this study suggests that this is not the case, as more fathers continue to participate in sharing responsibilities, although these tasks and how they are divided are still gendered. In another recent study by UBC Sociology's Yue Kwan and Sylvia Fuller, these researchers analyzed the gender employment gap in parents with young children. The study collected data from February to May 2020, with participants who were between 25 and 54 years old, and who were currently employed, or who had worked within the year but were not currently employed. Among this group, the study only looked at parents with children between the ages of 0 to 12 years old. Drawing on Statistics Canada data, Kwan and Fuller showed that more women had lost their jobs in March, but in April, more men had lost their jobs. However, in May, more men had regained their employment losses than women had. This research paralleled other recent research, which reveals that the pandemic's impact on unemployment in Canada has had a negative impact on people with less education. Additionally, workers who have less education have fewer options to work from home. In Kwan and Fuller's study, initially there was a disparity amongst university-educated parents as women were more impacted by school and childcare center closures. But this didn't last long, and in April, the gap within highly educated parents no longer remained. Their research also found that less educated mothers were hit by a double jeopardy, as they took on more childcare responsibilities, had fewer resources, and were in vulnerable labor market positions. Additionally, since women are more likely to take or already have jobs that are part-time in order to care for the children, this further contributes to the gender employment gap. As a result, Kwan and Fuller stress the importance of affordable and accessible childcare, as pandemics have proven childcare to be an essential service. Also, Kwan and Fuller note that job protection provisions should be made in order to accommodate caregiving responsibilities that parents have. Fuller and Hirsch note that these provisions would also help parents with less education, as they disproportionately work in on-site jobs without flexible schedules. Here's a study I mentioned earlier. A recent survey of more than 3,000 participants across the United States and Europe revealed that under the COVID-19 pandemic, women still do about 14 hours more domestic labor per week than their male partners. And this parallels research coming out of universities including Oxford, Cambridge, and Zurich, which found the same pattern within households across varying incomes. So how does this compare in other households? Within same-sex partnerships, research suggests that the division of labor is more evenly divided as couples engage in negotiations of what work they want to do. Likewise, in this recent Huffington Post article, we see an exploration of how queer and LGBTQ2S+ parents in Canada are navigating under quarantine times. The families interviewed in the article are part of multi-household families where they share custody of their children with the households of their ex-partners. In the article, many families expressed how having a multi-household was beneficial in sharing some of the child-rearing responsibilities while still being in isolation. In the article, Rachel Farr, assistant professor of psychology at the University of Kentucky, discussed how in queer and LGBTQ2S+ families, parents have always had to be creative when forming their families as a result of barriers such as, quote, reproductive discrimination and economic and legal obstacles over everything from parental rights to child custody, unquote. Therefore, quote, to make a family as an LGBTQ2S+ parent takes intentions and planning, and often involves a village of support, from queer-friendly birthing professionals to surrogates, unquote. Farr also discusses how queer people are most likely to have chosen families, thus mobilizing various forms of social support. The reasons for queer people having chosen families are various, and Farr suggests that this might be due to individuals valuing community, but also due to rejection from biological family members.